When you feel like giving up the most, that's always an indication your breakthrough is just around the corner. And the more you sit with that idea, the more you will realize that it's true. Because discouragement doesn't usually show up when you first start something, right? It shows up after you've been faithful for a while, after you've prayed, believed, and obeyed, after you've done the right thing again and again, and you're still not seeing the change that you're hoping for. That's when weariness kind of tends to creep in, right? That's when quitting starts to look tempting. But feeling tired doesn't mean you're failing, okay? It means you're carrying something and you've been doing it faithfully for a long time. And in many cases, that weariness is not a sign that God has forgotten you, but it's a sign that you're standing closer to the breakthrough than you even realize. And that's why Galatians 6:9 is so powerful. It tells us, let us not grow weary in doing good, for at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Okay? Scripture doesn't deny that weariness will come, because it will, right? It simply reminds us that quitting doesn't have to. And all throughout the Bible, there's a consistent pattern. The greatest moments of breakthrough often come right after a point where people would have walked away. Freedom, promises, and answered prayers are often on the other side of our persistence, of choosing to keep going even when it feels hard or slow or discouraging. And that's what this message is about today. Learning how to stay persistent when you're weary, how to keep showing up when nothing seems to be changing, and why in God's economy, persistence is never wasted. What wears us down the most isn't always the work itself, right? Oftentimes it's the waiting. It's the doing the right thing and not seeing immediate change, right? It's trusting God when a timeline feels unclear and the outcome feels uncertain. And this is where a lot of people get stuck. Not because they stop believing in God, but because they start questioning whether their obedience is actually making a difference. They wonder if their prayers still matter, if their faithfulness is doing anything at all. But Scripture gives us an important perspective. Weariness is nothing to be ashamed of. It's simply part of the process, right? The Bible doesn't pretend the journey will always be rewarding in the moment. In fact, it tells us we will go through tribulation, right? But it reminds us not to quit in the middle of it. There's this sacred tension in the waiting season. God is often working in ways that we can't see yet, growing things underground before anything breaks the surface. And when you walk away too soon, you may never realize how close you are to seeing the fruit. So weariness doesn't mean you're off track. It doesn't. It often means you're still in it, and sometimes staying in it is the very thing that leads to the breakthrough. I was actually reminded of this recently in the story of Moses, when he went to confront Pharaoh about releasing the Israelites, right? God tells Moses very plainly, go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. After some hesitation from Moses' part, he obeys. He walks into Pharaoh's presence and delivers the message that God gave him. But Pharaoh doesn't just say no once. No, he says no again and again and again. There's this constant back and forth in the story. If you go read it, Moses speaks, Pharaoh resists. Pharaoh makes a promise that he'll do it, but then Pharaoh changes his mind over and over again. The same cycle. From my perspective, it would have been incredibly discouraging. Moses could have easily concluded, this isn't working, or God, I tried, but he's not listening, right? And if most of us were in Moses's position, we probably would have quit after the third or fourth attempt, right? We would have assumed that persistence was pointless, but Moses didn't quit. He kept showing up. He kept obeying God. He kept speaking what God told him to say, even after disappointment, even after the setbacks, even after the false hope that Pharaoh kept providing, right? And after at least 10 trips, because the 10 plagues, those were each a trip of their own, right, to Pharaoh, because Moses persisted, Pharaoh finally let the Israelites go, and an entire nation walked into freedom. Now, it's worth asking ourselves, what if Moses had quit too soon? And what miracles might we be walking away from simply because we gave up too soon? What breakthroughs do you miss because you're tired of trying one more time? Jesus tells another powerful story about persistence. In fact, the story is called The Persistent Widow, right? In Luke 18, he talks about a widow who keeps going to a judge asking for justice. The judge doesn't fear God and doesn't care about people. And at first, he completely ignores her. But she doesn't stop going back. She returns again and again and again, and she refuses to let silence be the final answer. Eventually, the judge gives in and says, because she keeps coming, he'll grant her justice. Jesus's point here in this story is striking because he says, if persistence can move the unjust judge, how much more does a loving, righteous God who cares about his children, how much more so would he, answer persistent prayers, right? This story isn't about being annoying or demanding. It's about being unyielding in faith. It teaches us not to stop praying, not to stop asking, not to stop believing, and not to stop trusting. So often, persistence is a bridge between what God has promised and what we eventually experience. And walking away too soon means we never cross that bridge. If you are feeling worn down or discouraged, Scripture brings encouragement. God speaks directly to those who are tempted to give up in many scriptures, but here are a few. Galatians 6:9 again reminds us that at the proper time, we will reap a harvest if we do not give up. Hebrews 10:36 says perseverance is necessary if we want to receive what God has promised. James 1:12 speaks to blessing for those who persevere under trial, and Isaiah 40:31 promises renewed strength to those who hope in the Lord. The reward doesn't go to the fastest, the loudest, or the most talented, but to those who stay, endure, keep trusting God, even when the journey is hard. Right? And persistence isn't just a biblical principle. I mean, think about it. Thomas Edison failed over 1,000 times while trying to invent the light bulb. Oh my gosh, how many of us would have given up? And when he was asked about it, he famously said, I haven't failed. I just simply found thousands of ways that didn't work, right? J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter manuscript was rejected by 12 publishers before one finally said yes. Oh my goodness. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school basketball team, which I'm sure they regret now, but before he became one of the greatest athletes in history, right? And that's just a few of many who persisted. Think about people who stayed faithful in their calling, their ministry, their walk with God, not because it was easy, but because they refused to quit when it was hard. So often, breakthrough belongs to the person who simply decides, I will try one more time. Okay? One more time. Just give it another try. Keep going. The real battle isn't whether God is faithful. It's whether we'll stay faithful long enough to see it to the other side. The enemy loves to whisper subtle lies like, it's not working. You should stop trying. You look foolish. Giving up would just be easier, right? But persistence pushes back against those lies. Persistence says, I trust God even when I don't see the results yet. It says, I'll keep sowing even when I don't see the fruit, and I won't quit before the harvest. Every time you choose to persist, you are making a declaration in the spiritual realm that your faith is stronger than your frustration. If you are watching this today and you feel like quitting, whether it's quitting your calling, whatever that may be, quitting your marriage, quitting your dream, quitting your ministry or your healing, or even your faith, I want you to hear this. Your breakthrough is coming. You must not give up. Don't quit on what God called you to. Don't quit on what He's promised you. Don't quit on what He's planted inside of you, because the harvest doesn't come from those who stop sowing. It doesn't come to those who stop sowing, I should say. You might feel like Moses, going back to Pharaoh again and again and again. You might feel like that widow knocking at the door that hasn't opened yet. You might feel tired, discouraged, and worn down. But Galatians 6:9 still stands. It doesn't say that you'll reap a harvest if you're perfect or if you never get tired. It says you'll reap a harvest if you do not give up. So do not give up on God. Do not give up on your calling. Do not give up on your future. Don't give up on the seeds that you've planted, because persistence today will become your miracle tomorrow. And if you've been persistent and you're still at a point where you're thinking, I don't know if I can keep doing this the same way over and over again, I want you to watch this video next on how to fight your battles. And I believe it will help you in this season. But until next time, have a blessed week.